from groundbreaking to grand openings. This is Beyond the Blueprint. Join host Brad Howard as he takes you behind the scenes of growth and development in Mooresville, Lake Norman, and beyond. We're talking with the decision makers, the planners, the visionaries shaping our communities, giving exclusive insight into what happens before, during, and after projects that define our region. The future is being built right now. Let's go beyond the blueprint.
Good afternoon. Thank you to those tuning in on the radio on 105.9 FM, 100.7 FM, 1400 AM, on social media, on WSICnews.com, and on demand with the WSIC News app. I'm your host, Brad Howard, and today we're joined by Lynette Rinker, former mayor and mayor pro tem for the town of Cornelius, and we will plan to have a conversation and gain her perspective on the growth and changes that have occurred over the last 30 years of living in Cornelius and the region, being involved locally in public office and politics. So, who is Lynette? Let's start there.
Well, first of all, Brad, thank you for having me. Living here for 30 years and seeing all the changes in Cornelius, it's just been amazing to think that we used to watch cows run down the center line of Westmoreland Road, and now,
Cows on Westmoreland.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, running down the road, middle of the road. They'd get out of the pasture there and run down the middle of the road. So that's how far we've come.
That's a long way. So let's go back. So you came to Cornelius 30 years ago. You came from Columbia.
Columbia, South Carolina.
So again, who's Lynette? Let's start back in Columbia. What brought you here?
Well, my husband's job brought us here. But the beginning of my career, after I graduated from the University of South Carolina, I took a job in the Office of Facilities Planning.
Okay.
We managed all the design, construction, long-range planning for all 9 university campuses. There were 9 at that time. And also the operations of the Columbia campus.
Oh, wow.
And I used to laugh and tell Anthony Roberts, the town manager that I worked with, that having the operations of the Columbia campus was very much like running a town and city. I'd already done his job, and I never wanted to do his job again. But all of my career has been somewhere at the intersection of government and construction and design. And that's always what made me tick.
And not just the university system, also the prison system.
Yes, I also was the budget analyst for the Department of Corrections, housed in the governor's office of South Carolina, back when they were under court order for having to mitigate overcrowding. So they had this huge capital campaign going on, and so understanding the connection between capital and operating and bringing all those prisons on. So that was
task.
Yeah, it was interesting. And having spent the 10 years prior in higher education and then coming into a totally different state agency, and understanding, those needs, and was really quite an education, and one that really helped me understand better, how public financing.
Right. So public financing, working with the private sector, and like you said, where all the government and all the agencies come together. And that was early in your career.
It was.
And you've been here 30 years.
Right.
So you got here, and when did you throw yourself into politics here?
Probably sometime in the early 2000s. Anybody who gets involved in public service, I always laugh and say, there's the straw that breaks the camel back, and you go, I can do this better.
What was your straw?
As people will understand now, it was roads and where they were trying to build them.
That's the same conversion they're having today.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
So you started. So what was the road issue when you said I'm running for public office?
Well, they were trying to look at, and it's still an issue, connectivity on the east side.
Okay, and let's take people back to that time period. I'm even trying to think what was here. So let's see, was it still the ham and eggs and the Quincy's?
Oh no, we were beyond that.
We were beyond that.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Let's see,
But
the car dealerships were there.
the car dealership was here.
There was a movie theater. Was there still a movie
Oh
theater?
yeah, the movie theater was still here then.
Okay.
But yeah, they were looking at connectivity on the east side, and and there was a study done, and what I called it was the shortest distance between 2 points on Google Earth, and that's where they were running the roads without much consideration of what impact it would have on the historic and established neighborhoods.
Okay.
And, we're still seeing that impact currently on the Smithville
Correct.
neighborhood. So, what's old is new again. It never went away.
So was this project the one where you connected 77 to where Antiquity is today?
No, this was still that came later, I think, or
Okay.
I'm fuzzy
I'm
on
trying to put my
when that.
timeline back together.
Yeah. This would have been like 2005, 2006,
Okay.
2007, back in there. And the town board at that time had a growth management committee. I mean, again, some of these themes are still
prevalent
here we
today.
are,
Right.
20 years later, and we're still talking about growth management. We were trying to present recommendations to the town board at that time as to, how to manage the growth so it didn't destroy our quality of life.
Right.
And so I was involved with that. That really was sort of my first taste of getting involved with the town. And quite frankly, all I ever wanted to do was be on the planning committee because I felt
You just
like
wanted to have a
that.
say.
Well,
Right,
I
or
felt like
voice.
with my background in design and construction, intersection with government and regulations and laws, that was where I could best be effective and help. And so I was eventually appointed to the planning board, and then, from there was elected twice by the citizens of Cornelius. So, so quite proud of the things we accomplished when I was on the town board. Just two of those, we laid the seeds for planted the seeds for the arts center and the arts growth that's, really transforming the east side of town.
Absolutely, the Kane Arts Center. And,
Yeah.
And back at that point, were the plans in place yet for the town hall? And
Oh, they had already been built.
They had already been built.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were built actually
I'm trying to put my time frames together.
late 1990s, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, will forget we had someone from the Arts and Science Commission at that point come and speak to us at a pre-meeting about using, and we actually took a trip to Salisbury to talk to them about how they had used arts to revitalize their downtown. And so we had Arts and Science Council come and talk about, how other small communities had used arts to revitalize their downtown. And we're seeing it now.
Yeah,
and that's very, very exciting to see all that come to pass.
Right. So all the groundwork that you laid, back in those early days is now people can enjoy.
Right.
So when we come back, we'll continue that conversation. We'll be right back. And we're back with Beyond the Blueprint with Lynette Rinker, the former mayor and mayor pro tem of the town of Cornelius. And we are talking about the past 30 years, the changes from when there was the straw that broke the camel's back and she got involved in politics and started making a difference here locally. So and then during the break, we were getting caught back up. I was trying to get in my head straight what the lay of the land was back then. So there was, Antiquity was not there. So for people that weren't here back then, it was a much different place.
Right.
So it was a much different place.
Much different place.
And we have a lot of the same concerns happening today. And we need to let's go down memory lane and go back to then, and then see how we can work to maybe not have this conversation 30 years from now.
One would
Right?
hope.
One would hope. One would hope. So
One would hope.
learn from the past, and we'll go from there. So we were going. So the town hall was there. The art center was there.
No,
and-
the
art
police
center
station was there.
The police station was there.
The old blue building, the feed and seed store was
Oh, my
there at the
gosh,
time.
I remember. The so yeah, but how you utilized arts and started the planning and laid the groundwork for it back then, that people enjoy the Kane Center and everything today.
Right, yeah.
So take us down that road.
Well, we did the Navigate Cornelius, which was the 10-year master plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was in 2010. We were doing a 10-year, look ahead, if you will,
Okay.
for 2020, and here we are, 2025.
So what were the projects on the list back 10 years prior? So how many of those came?
Well,
came
we
to
didn't
fruition?
have specific projects.
Mm-hmm.
It was more developing a framework for how we wanted Cornelius to grow in the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we did something very unique with that master plan, and that is it was citizen-driven.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't consultant-driven or town board-driven. It was citizen-driven. We had volunteer groups that sorted themselves out in planning groups that met in people's living rooms after church on Sunday. And they came up. Each group had a certain task or area of emphasis, and then they brought back to us what their recommendations were. So the master plan that we did in 2010 was citizen driven, and I think because of that, many of the decisions that were made in those intervening 10 years, and probably in the last 5 years, have been influenced by what the citizens said they wanted their town to look like in the future.
Mm-hmm. So and of that, what projects sprang out of that? Trying to follow the timeline.
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of emphasis on the parks and recreation, our greenway, and obviously we talked about the art center. I think you've seen a shift somewhat to less residential, but part of that is because we're almost built out.
It's full.
We're almost built out. There's no more room for.
There's not a lot of land.
There's not a lot of
Vacant
land.
left.
Some of that was a fait accompli, and what you're seeing now is more infill, which is as it should be. But we always and I've always looked at planning and development from a development standpoint from a town board member is it's a three-legged stool. You're always trying to balance property rights. You're always trying to balance infrastructure, and you're always trying to balance quality of life for the existing citizens. And underpinning all of those decisions that you're trying to balance is state and federal law.
Right.
I mean, I think what citizens sometimes forget that decisions, or many times you have a very narrow ability to make decisions
Right.
because you're constrained by state and many times federal law.
On federal law, and and on these and talking and trying to pull some things together. A lot of the people, we had this discussion several shows ago when I think Commissioner Johnson and Carney were on, and we were discussing roads, and a lot of folks don't understand that the state actually funds the roads and maintains the roads. Now there's some nuances where you can participate locally, and
Right.
but people too don't understand how long it takes to get a road from the time we start talking about it till you get it to the STIP, until you get it all the way to the ground.
I'm sure y'all probably talked about the fact that we started talking about widening West Catawba Avenue in the as soon as we finished the first phase, which was probably mid-2000s, and here we are
Still talking about
still
widening.
talking about it, and it's probably a number of years off.
Right.
So,
hopefully it's not as long as we had one with Bill Thunberg, and it was when the draft STIP was coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about 150, and he reminded everyone on the radio, I believe, that we started talking about widening Highway 150 in 1987.
Jeez. Yeah.
And here it is, 2025, and visibly you're seeing it on the road.
Right.
Let's hope it doesn't take that many years to finish Catawba.
Well, one of the things also that, it's hard to wrap your mind around, because we sit in traffic every day. We deal with this every day. Mm-hmm. But North Carolina is a very big state, and it has tremendous need, not only to accommodate the growth, but also to spur development. As always, the old formula that, we used to use to allocate highway funding. And highway funding in North Carolina is, it's a zero-sum game because there are way more needs than there is money. So if I get something, it means you lost something. Right. So you have the needs of an entire state to balance.
Right.
And I mean, it's hard to think about, why we need a bridge in Perquimans County and why that's more important than getting me home at a decent hour.
Yeah, and then if we have natural disasters like this last year, and funding has to be reallocated because they're having to look at it from the whole state's perspective, and not just our local perspective. So I don't know. So
there's that leg of that stool that you have very little to no control over, but you have to deal with the property rights and the quality of life, and other state and federal laws. So it's a complex decision. It's not quite as cut and dried and simple as people might think. And then we're also living with the, we'll call them, sins of our fathers and some of the decisions that were made 20 and 30 years ago that, we're living with the impact of that. Again, we're constrained by many things that, you couldn't say, I can't approve your project because of the roads, that we're not allowed to do that.
Right. And a lot of people don't understand the rules that you have to stay within.
Right. Right. It's difficult.
Yeah. But another caveat is, people may complain, but, there's still a lot of people that want to move here. So it can't be too bad.
Well,
I've been other places that it's horrible.
I encountered someone in the grocery store the other day, complaining about all the traffic and all the people. And I didn't know this woman. And I looked at her and I said, would you rather live in a place that's vibrant and growing and people want to come to, or a place that's dying and people are leaving? And she just kind of looked at me and she went, well, you're right. And so, we've little slice of heaven here.
Right.
And we can't just close the gates because we were here first.
That's right. And there was one that we used on a couple of shows before where the folks were standing out their driveway and the farm across the street, and they were, working and organizing to stop it. But, you have to remind everybody here that moved here from somewhere else that standing in the driveway that driveway was a farm.
Exactly.
So that was somebody's farm, and there was somebody standing in another driveway trying to prevent them from enjoying it. So you have to look and you have to balance the decisions, looking on both sides of the equation. And not, everybody gets personal and emotional.
Right.
But again, we have to make decisions, and as a political leader, you have to make decisions that are not 1 year or 5 years. You have to look at things 15, 20, and 50 years down the road.
You try to.
And that's what a lot of people miss is, as a political leader, and you're making decisions are not for today or tomorrow, because, even approving a subdivision, by the time the land is contracted, you go through planning,
all the permitting,
and then you just get to zoning approvals over a year, and some of our towns could be 2 or 3 years. And, from that point, then you go through construction documents and permitting, and, so when you see, 200 houses or 400 houses get approved, it's a decade before those houses are all built out on the ground or close to it.
And what we have still in Cornelius are approved plans that, are by right. And as long as they build what was approved back 30 years ago,
they're vested.
And there is, nothing anyone can say or do about it. So there's still a number of those pieces of property where they're vested, and they can, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't, yeah. So it's moving forward at some point.
At some point,
whenever the time is right. But no, there are a lot of things, and on that corridor between Cornelius and Huntersville that we were just talking about on Catawba, traffic is pretty rough there. But when it does get widened, that'll be a phenomenal corridor.
It will.
Going down to
it will.
Highway 73.
Right. And when you consider the improvements that they're making to 73, it'll just enhance the mobility on West Catawba.
And I think there's a good bit more commercial that's planned in that corridor as well, so that'll help with the tax base, which goes back to looking at things, stepping back and looking at 20,000 feet holistically, where you needed more commercial, which is what you were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
Because when you have a community that's all residential and
burden,
service-based,
the tax burden is tough on the homeowner.
Right. So by bringing in more industry and commercial, it'll help balance
should
help if you control spending. It should help balance out the taxes. And we will be right back. And we're back Beyond the Blueprint with Lynette Rinker, talking about the last 30 years in Cornelius, from her time as mayor and mayor pro tem. So on taxes, you had mentioned at the break that you wanted to discuss civic capital. And I've never heard that term, but let's learn about civic capital.
All right. Before we move to that, I just want to make a point about, we were talking about the tax base.
Yes.
And it's probably a little better now. When I was on the town board, I think it was 83 residential, 17 commercial.
Right.
But one of the things we did in conjunction with our 10-year master plan that I referred to earlier, we had an algorithm created that would tell us essentially what the break-even point on something would be, in that it would generate enough tax revenue to cover the cost of police and schools. And, we had so, I don't even know that they're using it now, but it was just a data point to help inform decision makers going forward, so we weren't burdening a certain sector of our tax base with costs that had to be made up somewhere else. We were trying to make it a pay-go, pay as you go. Yeah. So I mentioned civic capital, and that's something that I always sort of kept forefront of mind. My background being in design and construction and architecture, I always wanted to make sure our sense of place and what would go into civic capital would be not only the consumption of existing infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, schools, parks, but also what a development or a new building would either contribute or take away from our sense of place. And I got dinged big time because I, was cast the deciding vote against a project that was being brought to us, a conditional use project, because, it just didn't architecturally or aesthetically add anything to our sense of place. And, it was on a very high profile corridor. And, it was just trying to set the mindset of people coming before us to say, let's stop and think about what we're bringing and how we are contributing and not taking out of the civic capital. And I would like to maybe think we could have that conversation even more in depth now, and not you and not the two of us, but in a more global sense of civic capital and the aesthetics and creating and making sure we're protecting our sense of place as much as we are our other resources.
Yeah, and in doing that, and one thing that we're very big proponents of is people sitting down and talking. So different not just the developers or the electeds, but everyone sitting down together And you said it before, a sense of purpose, sense of place, and people and companies when they're coming and looking, doing things with purpose. So you don't want Huntersville to look like Cornelius, to look like Davidson, to look like Mooresville, to look like Troutman, to look like Statesville. They all need to be unique, vibrant, independent communities. But I believe that everyone needs to sit down at the table together and say, how do we work together as a region?
Right.
We're not trying to make anyone any different, but everybody has their own identity, because we want people to come from out of town and say, oh, wow, I love Cornelius. When you get off the interstate, it's like this. I love Davidson. I love Mooresville, Huntersville.
Right,
So,
right.
everybody has their own character, their own charm. And the word I used before, I think there is it's intentionally done with purpose. And it goes back to your civic capital discussion, is we incorporate parks and rec, and the communities come together. Looking from the time when you were on the board, are the communities working better together?
Oh, absolutely. And we worked well when I was on the town board.
Right.
Jill Swain was mayor, John Woods was mayor in Davidson, and we had a great and Miles Atkins up in Mooresville. We had great working relationships. Just did a lot of work together. A lot of coffee. A lot of lunches together. I mean, not necessarily not formal meetings, but we worked extremely well together, because a car from Mooresville driving to Charlotte comes through Davidson, Cornelius, and Huntersville.
Right.
So
We all need to sit down and talk.
We all need to sit down and talk, for
Right.
sure, for sure.
Yeah. And then with a lot of the projects that we're seeing out there, and I know you are as well, having the political, the public side, the private side, working together, as with roads and utility infrastructure and just planning in general, it helps with business recruitment. It helps with so many different aspects of the local economy. People, they don't think about on a daily basis. It's just like roads. Nobody thinks about roads and says, oh, we need to build a road. They don't realize it takes 7+ years once you talk about that road.
If I had cash in hand to pay for it,
Right.
It would take 7-10 years to build
and
it.
by the time it gets to that 7th year, there's no cash there from the state, then it might be 10 years or 12 years or
Right.
15, 20 years.
I think one of the most amazing things that I've seen in the last 30 years is the fact that we have all these healthcare facilities in our region, and I literally have an atrium hospital out my back door. In 30 years, I never would have imagined that we would have access to that type of health care literally out our back door.
Out your back door, that's right.
That is a phenomenal thing.
Right. And then just north of here, Duke's
Duke,
acquisition
yeah.
of Lake Norman and
Yeah.
Novant down
and
in
Novant and Huntersville. I mean, those of us that have been around, it was tough to even find a doctor here, much less have 3 hospitals that you could throw a rock and hit.
And that's just in the recent history. If you go back to when I was younger, we mentioned the movie theater earlier. When they built the movie theater in Cornelius, that saved us from having to drive all the way to University Place.
Oh yeah,
to go to the movie theater. And go back to Burkdale, before that was there, it was cow
it was
pasture.
A horse pasture. It was horse
a
pasture. You just sit
yeah.
there and watch the horses up on the hill.
I remember they built the gym, and you would come out of the gym, because that was the closest gym that we had when we lived in Mooresville. And you would just smell the manure when you came out of the gym.
Right.
Was,
I remember when Target, going back
Target,
to our 30-year retrospective here.
And people, there was no Burkdale. There was no Target.
Yeah. When Target opened, that was like date night. You went to Target on Friday night. I mean, I remember when it opened, it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've changed
We've changed
in
a
a
lot.
short few years. And even Cornelius, when I made the comment earlier, I couldn't remember if the ham and eggs, when you got off at exit 28, there was a restaurant on one side, there was a ham and eggs on the other side.
Yeah, there was the place that ultimately became Acropolis. It was a steakhouse.
Quincy's Steakhouse.
Quincy's was here, and we had Mom and Pop, the meat and three, where Lucky Dog is now, and so it's
very different for people that were not here at the time.
and it's really, and you know, we don't have to leave our region now.
No.
We don't have to, we have the best of all worlds. We have the conveniences for everyday living right here in our area. And we also have the benefit of having a major metropolitan city where we have access to pro sports and, world-class arts. And, then we have the recreation of the lake. And, it's understandable why people want to be here.
Yeah, well, everybody's moving here. And I don't remember what the exact statistic is, but it's around 130 plus people a day are moving to the Charlotte MSA.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a big portion of them are moving up here. So,
yeah, we're glad to have them.
We're glad to have them. So, like you said, we'd much rather be growing than shrinking.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
But yeah, so we will. We're going to talk. Coming back, we're going to learn more about the civic side, not the civic capital side, but the civic side of Lynette Rinker. So we'll be back after this. And we're back on Beyond the Blueprint with Lynette Rinker, the former mayor and mayor pro tem of the town of Cornelius. And we're going to take a little pivot here. But before we do that, I had a list of things that we were going to talk about, and they were what came up online when we talked about the impact that you had on Cornelius at your tenure here in office. And for people that aren't from here, that weren't here at the time, so you think about your community today and how do things happen and how do they get there. So the specific things that are credited to Lynette are launching the Comprehensive Master Plan of 2012, championing the Navigate Cornelius process, supported the beginnings of the Kane Arts Center, overhauled the land use and zoning policies, balanced growth and community character, and promoted economic development and activity centers. It is amazing to look back and know that you had these impacts and you laid the foundation for what's happening in Cornelius today.
Well, it is when you kind of read it out like that.
Yeah.
But as a public servant,
Right.
That's all you hope to do is to affect not only the day-to-day business of a town,
Right.
but also, to lay the foundation for, ensuring. And I always said, I want my kids were raised here.
Right.
And I always wanted to make sure, and this was sort of my guiding light,
Right.
that the next generation of kids that came beyond mine had the same wonderful childhood and experience growing up in Cornelius.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could do that, then, I felt my time in office was valuable.
And it was. So yeah, well, you should be proud of a lot of these accomplishments here.
Well, thank you.
And,
Thank you.
And that takes us to the civic side, because not just the civic capital, but I know you're very involved in nonprofits and a lot of things behind the scenes that most people don't know about. But open our eyes to that. Tell us, what makes Lynette tick? What are some of the things that you enjoy that give you that you have passion about on the other side?
Well, after I left the service on the town board, I was very active in the Republican Party in Mecklenburg County and the state, vice chair of the Mecklenburg County Party. Probably did that for about 10 years. I was president of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Republican Women, which is a legacy women's club in North Carolina, founded, I think, in 1952.
Wow.
So I did that for a good while. And also, in the last 10 years, I have been very active in the Red, White, and Bundled Foundation, which is Susan Tillis's foundation that supports junior enlisted service folks at Fort Bragg,
Mm-hmm.
and helping young moms as they bring their little ones home and ensuring they have the essential things to bring their babies home. A onesie, and sleeper, diapers. Things that some of these young moms, they're
Just don't have.
separated from their families, and many times spouse is deployed, and they are literally by themselves. And so they really don't know what they need. And, we get thank you notes back that say, the gift we got from Red, White, and Bundled, and these bundles are delivered to them in the hospital
Oh, wow.
at Womack before they come home.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get thank you notes saying, this was the only gift my baby got.
Oh.
So, it just is heartwarming and so fulfilling to know that, I kind of call Red, White, and Bundles the loaves and fishes model, because people will give us one, you have no idea what impact one onesie or one pack of diapers can make in someone else's life. You don't have to make a grand gesture. One onesie or a pack of diapers will just mean so much to someone. So, still honored to be a part of that effort and helping it grow. We're approaching $1 million in donations.
Wow.
And we hope to meet that in the next 12 months. So when you think about, we're just, a bunch of women who
Making a difference.
and using our gifts and talents to really help these moms and these young women as they enjoy their babies. So involved with that. Starting my 9th year on the Board of Trustees at Woodlawn School.
Okay.
My daughter is a graduate, class of 2012. And, the education that she got at Woodlawn School transformed her life. She went on to, great college and, just really prepared her to be successful. And, I could go on and on about the gifts that Woodlawn School and they give their students. But I'm chair of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and we are currently in the process of planning a new classroom building, which is exciting to witness the growth that has been occurring with our head of school, Holly Honeycutt, and to be a part of having started on that campus in 2007 with Tori in 8th grade.
And it's made a lot of changes since
And
2007.
it has, yeah. And to see the excitement and the growth that, and the, just the opportunities they're providing for our area students is remarkable. So, I'm busy with that. And so the other thing that I did recently, I realized the dream of a 6th grade Lynette.
A sixth grade Lynette.
Okay.
Okay.
I had always wanted to join the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Okay.
And so I filled out the application, and our wonderful membership chair here at the Alexandriana chapter found patriots on my mother's side of the family that I knew nothing about.
Right.
And I actually was admitted based on a female patriot, which is
Really?
very unusual.
Wow.
Yeah, from
who's
Southern
that?
Virginia.
From Southern Virginia.
Jane Baker, Southern Virginia.
Okay.
And so I have a long history of women making trouble and making
trouble,
history.
making history, and making an impact on the community, and just not just the public side, but the volunteering you're doing now after retirement. If you probably are working more in retirement than you did when you were working. With your
to
service
some
work.
extent, yeah, absolutely.
So, but still making an impact on things that are, you have the ability to look back and see the things that you did and put in place and those decisions over 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, and the changes that were made and the impacts that were made. And that's what we have to do today is with purpose, encourage people to be more active and proactive in their local communities and get involved and make the difference that in 15, 20, 30 years we look back and say, they have the ability to say, look, I stepped up when I needed to, I got involved, and our community is doing this because of something I did back then or participated in. And I don't know how we get more people involved. Maybe you have some insight into that.
Well, I do. I think I had a conversation with a college classmate of my husband's recently who was, very distraught about some of the things going on nationally and live Massachusetts. And, it's kind of call to arms. We've got to do something. And I looked at her and, I said, you really should consider getting involved in your local community. I said, run for your town board, your town council, your board of aldermen, whatever. I said, because in many ways you can make a bigger impact on your community at the local level. You impact people's quality of life really at the local level. And the government closest to the people is the government that's best for the people.
Right.
And so, if you're thinking about how you might serve your community, filing starts in July.
That is a very good point. So if you want to run in a local municipal race, do you know what the exact date is?
I don't, but filing is in July.
You can check your Board of Elections.
Right. So now is the time, if you've been thinking about how you could use your time and your talent to serve your fellow citizens in your town and make a difference like I did, I'd encourage you to consider, filing for office and running.
And you should. It's a great way to get out and actually learn more about the community. Win, lose, or draw, you get involved. And it's not, if you don't win and it was your first time, don't give up.
Right. Try again.
But stay involved. Stay involved.
Yeah. Stay involved.
Stay involved because you will make an impact. And you may not see it in 1 year, 5 years, 3 years, but if you are effective and you are involved, you will make an impact and make things better in the future. On that, I just want to thank you for coming and
thank you, Brad, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for the impact that you've had on Cornelius in this region. And we will come back with more at a later date and see what else you've been up to. So, Lynette Rinker, a former mayor and mayor pro tem of the town of Cornelius, thank you very much, and we will see you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.